guys, it's Casey, and today I've got for you my February wrap-up. So February was a pretty good reading month for me. I read a total of 7 books, but I actually read more pages than I did in January. And as far as ratings go, I had a pretty solid month too. I had a lot of books that I gave 5 stars to, and a lot of books that really sat on the border between like 3 and 4 stars or 4 and 5 stars. So this is kind of the ratings I've landed on today. But I have been super conflicted about several of these, and I'll kind of talk about that as I go through each book. But overall in February, I had 2 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 3 5-star books, I think. So I managed to read all 6 of the books that I had on my TBR for February, and I got an extra one in there this month. But the first book I read this month was Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So overall, I think I'm gonna give this one 3.5 stars. This one was right on the border of a 3 and a 4 star for me. But I know this is a super well-loved book, so let's get into my thoughts on it. Ultimately, I very much enjoyed this book. I really liked how all of the characters were very morally gray, which is something that this book is kind of known for, and the plot was enjoyable, the writing style was good, but none of those things like blew me out of the water, and I wonder if it's because of some of the hype that surrounds this book. I know that a lot of people really love this story, and like I said, I had fun while I was reading it, but it's not sticking with me. So this was the first book I read in the beginning of the month, and now towards the end of the month when I was thinking on what I had read, I honestly kind of forgot about this one, and it didn't leave as much of a lasting impact as I had hoped that it would. I had a fun time while I read it. I don't love it as much as I expected to or as much as I wanted to. However, I would still absolutely recommend this book. I did get through it rather quickly, so it was a very fast-paced, enjoyable read. I felt like I didn't connect to some of the characters as much as other people seem to. I enjoyed them and I enjoyed the discussions that they allowed the book to have, but I didn't feel like I was very much rooting for one character or was very excited about one. One of my favorite things about the story was probably V.E. Schwab's writing style. I've read a couple of her books before and I've really enjoyed all of them, I think more than I have Vicious actually. She writes in a way that feels very appropriate to the story that she's writing. This one was a little bit jarring at times, a little bit unsettling in the places that it needed to be, and I really liked the structure of the chapters where we were kind of flashing back to before all of this happened and then also working towards a countdown or a deadline of sorts. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but it just didn't connect with me as much as I wanted it to. That being said, I still plan on picking up the sequel. I still liked this. Again, it sits right between a 3 and a 4 star. I think originally I was gonna give it a 4 star, and then I just lowered it down to like a 3.5. The next book I read in February was a reread for me, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I don't even know if I have to say it at this point. This was 5 stars. So this is a book I read for the first time last March, I think, and I started calling it my new favorite book of all time. And so now that a year has passed, I wanted to kind of reread it and see if I still felt that way, and it fit for the reread prompt on my TBR. And I do still feel that way. This book is beautiful and wonderful. It is my personal perfect book. I love it so much. I also tabbed it out this time, and I'm very happy about it. So The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is about a girl named Rosemary Harper who joins the crew of the Wayfarer, which is a tunneling ship. So essentially they work to punch holes through space to create wormholes and tunnels for ships to go through. And this book follows this cast of characters as they get a new job that's going to require them to go on a year-long trek to the job site. And so this book really is about the interactions between the crew and the character development and the moral questions that come up with the mixing of these very interesting and rich alien cultures. And I love it so much. It is an extremely character-driven sci-fi, and it works so perfectly for me. It has all of the elements that I really enjoy about sci-fi and fantasy, and characters that I absolutely love. That being said, not a huge amount like happens in this. It is almost kind of like slice of life moments throughout the story as they're on their way to this planet, but it's exactly what I want, and I couldn't be happier. 5 stars. So excited. So the next book I read was Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. So this is a young adult historical fiction that follows our main character Monty, his best friend Percy, and his sister Felicity as they go on a tour across Europe. And as they're going on this tour, some mishaps happen and it turns into kind of a fun adventure story. And I don't want to get into too much more of the plot than that because I really think it's fun to just kind of go in not knowing. So going into this, I didn't know a huge amount about it. I did know that our main character Monty was like canonically bisexual and that there was some element of a romance in here, but that was really all I knew, and I loved this so much. I gave it 4 stars. Again, this book didn't like completely blow me away. It wasn't totally a 5-star read for me, but I did really enjoy it. I liked our character of Monty. He's the kind of character type that I really enjoy. I also felt like there were a lot more deep questions about trauma and family that were brought up that I wasn't expecting through Monty's character, and his relationship with Percy is so good and wonderful, and I love it. I also really enjoyed the characters of Percy and Felicity. I felt like they added a lot to the story. Overall, the plot I was kind of less interested in. I was mostly there for the characters and all of their interactions, which was totally fine, but the plot was an interesting and it was a fun little adventure, but it wasn't like anything special to me. That being said, I was extremely here for the bi rep in Monty. It was so good and so well done, and I feel like I don't see that in a lot of books. I demand more bi characters, especially in science fiction and fantasy, which I know this isn't, but still, I want to make the point. This book is kind of chunky, but it reads very quickly, so if you're looking for a YA kind of romance adventure story, I definitely think this is a good one to pick up. And I know I'm a little late to the party on this book, but if you are too, I would recommend this one. The next book I read in February was When the Bough Breaks by Jonathan Kellerman, and this was a book that I read for the prompt My Mom Picks a Book, so this is a story that my mom really enjoyed and wanted me to read. Ultimately, I gave this one 3 stars. So this is a mystery thriller, which is not usually my genre, and it is about a child psychologist named Dr. Delaware who gets called in to consult on a case. There has recently been a murder of a different psychologist, and one of the young girls in his building apparently saw something that night, so Dr. Delaware gets called in to kind of consult and see what he can get out of the girl. I like this more than I was expecting to like it, I'm not gonna lie. My mom's and my tastes don't usually line up that closely, but I did actually enjoy this, especially since mystery and thriller is not my bag normally. This surprised me a lot. Psychology and psychologists depicted in books can also be kind of a turnoff for me because it's usually done in a way that is extremely eye-rolly, and while there are a couple of those moments and there was definitely some ethically dubious things going on here, I felt like it wasn't unbearable for me to read. So the mystery itself was actually pretty interesting, and it got a lot darker than I was expecting to from the first half of this book. The second half got a lot darker than I was expecting, and I did enjoy that. The other thing I really liked about this is the detective that he's working with, Milo, is an openly gay character, and considering this was written in the 80s, I was a little bit surprised by that, especially since it's not like a major point of his character. It's just that he happens to be gay and we meet his boyfriend, and that's totally fine and normal and casual, which I really was surprised by in a book this old, but I really enjoyed it being there, and Milo is actually one of my favorite characters. I don't have a huge amount to say about it one way or the other. I think this one gets the 3-star rating for me, partially because of how surprised I was that I actually did enjoy it. And I know this is a series with an absolute crap ton of books in it, so I'm probably not going to continue the series, but I do think that this is a fun little like mystery series from the psychologist perspective. I did enjoy it. So the next book I read in February was Skin Game by Jim Butcher, which is the 15th book in the Dresden Files series. 5 stars. I gave this book 5 stars. This is probably my favorite Dresden book since Changes, which was my favorite Dresden book probably overall. So I think I've given this spiel in every single wrap-up and every single TBR that I've done, but broadly speaking, the Dresden Files follows wizard for hire Harry Dresden as he works as a consultant for the Chicago Police Department and as a private investigator. He investigates and solves all manner of crimes perpetrated by supernatural entities or have some kind of supernatural element to them. So that's the 2-sentence spiel that I give every single time, but again, it's barely applicable at this point because the series has expanded so much in 16 books. And I know that I usually don't talk about the plot of any of these books, and I'm not going to for this one either because no spoilers, but y'all, it's a heist novel. I think part of the reason I gave this 5 stars was how much I loved heist novels. I was talking to my roommate who's reading these kind of at the same time I am, and she did not give it a full 5 stars. She was not as invested in the plot, and she told me that she thinks that any book, if it had a heist element to it, is going to get at least 3 stars from me, no matter what the rest of the book has to say. And I think that might actually be true. I was so entertained by the plot. I was so engrossed in the story. I love a heist element so much. But outside of that, I also felt like there was a lot of character development. I felt like there were many moments in here that it was just so clear where the characters have come from the beginning or whenever they were introduced. I felt like there were moments that were very defining for a bunch of different characters in the series, and I feel like we got a lot of progression towards what is going to be the ending of the book. It felt very much like lining up all of the pieces, kind of taking stock of where everybody is and how they're doing before this kind of rush to the end that I know Peace Talks and Battlegrounds is going to start. Overall, 5 stars. Amazing book, favorite Dresden in a while. Then I decided to read another heist novel immediately on the back of that, and I read The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. Yes, I finally did it. So this one I think I'm gonna give 5 stars. So The Lies of Lamora is about a man named Lamora who is a con artist, essentially. He is a thief, he is a rogue, and he is conning people out of their money, particularly the rich and the nobles of this city. He has this band of thieves that he's taken over from the old master, known as the Gentlemen Bastards. And I loved them. Shocking no one. This was a great book for me. And this follows the Gentlemen Bastards as they attempt to pull off one of their biggest heists yet, but they hit some snags along the way as they kind of get wrapped up in various power struggles going on in the city. So this book, okay, I'm going to give it 5 stars. Because especially now thinking back and talking about the plot, I can feel that I'm getting like very excited about it and I want to talk about it. So it is a 5-star read. But I think what is confusing me a little bit and making me almost lean towards the lower end of 5 stars, towards a 4-star, is because this book was so hyped up and I was so convinced it was going to be a new favorite book of mine. I do think it's a 5-star book. I don't think it's a new favorite of all time, which does not mean the book shouldn't get 5 stars. Like, 5 stars don't always become favorites of all time, so it doesn't need to hit that level. But again, this one gets so much praise and so much love that I think I was expecting to be blown away a little bit more than I was. That being said, this book made me laugh out loud, it made me cry, it made me turn my stomach at some points. Like, it's a great book. For some reason, it just didn't hit me as much as I expected it to, and I don't think that's the book's fault. I think that is my own perceptions of what I was getting into's fault. I very much enjoyed the characters in this. Locke is exactly the character archetype that I love so much. His friendship with Jean, or Jean, however you say that, also wonderful, and I loved it. And the writing style of this book I actually really like. So I've heard that the writing style is something that can kind of put people off from this book because it very much has breaks in the middle of the action to kind of do flashbacks or give you the relevant background information. I was expecting to kind of have to get used to it, but it actually clicked for me pretty quickly, and I found myself really enjoying when we would cut away from what was going on, get the relevant piece of information from Locke's childhood, and then kind of come back. And some of, I thought, the funniest moments were in those kinds of transitions. This book was also more brutal than I was expecting it to be. I knew this was an adult fantasy book. Did I say that? Anyway, it's an adult fantasy book. But I didn't expect this book to get as dark as it did, and it is brutal. Some rough stuff happens to a lot of people in this. So I can't really find a lot of things to complain about in this book. If any, I feel like technically it was so well done. So I do think it is a 5-star book. I just don't think it's going to be like a 6-star for me. Like, I'm probably not going to add it to my favorites of all time list. That being said, I am very excited to pick up the sequels, although I don't think I'm going to be rushing to do that anytime soon because the 4th book in that series is kind of like Winds of Winter and Doors of Stone in that it may or may not ever actually come out. So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to pick up the next one when I feel like I'm in the mood for another kind of story like this. So those were the 6 books that were on my February TBR, and then I managed to squeeze in one more book, which is Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb, and how I managed to fit an extra 903 pages on my TBR, I'll never know. So Ship of Destiny is also one that I'm on the fence between a 4 and a 5, but I think on this one I'm gonna fall at a 4. I think it's a 4.5 overall for me. So Ship of Destiny is the 3rd and final book to the Live Ship Traders series by Robin Hobb, which is the 2nd series in her Realm of the Elderlings world. And overall, this series was amazing. The series itself is a 5-star series for me. This one had a couple of things in it that I think are preventing me from giving it a full 5 stars. I know I didn't like this quite as much as I liked Mad Ship, but I still liked it more than I did Ship of Magic, so I think it's right at like the highest a 4-star can be kind of an area. So this series is a multi-perspective adult fantasy series that follows primarily perspectives of members of the Vestrit family. So the Vestrit family owns what is called a live ship, which is a ship made out of this magical substance called wizard wood that if 3 generations of your family die on board the live ship, it becomes alive and it becomes like its own personality and sentience. These ships are very rare and very coveted because they're able to sail up the Rainwild River to trade in unique and special goods. So Ship of Magic opens where the patriarch of the Vestrit family, Ephron Vestrit, is dying, and all of the family members have gathered to kind of see him off as his funeral and to welcome the live ship Vivacia into the world. And during this, his daughter Althea expects to inherit Vivacia and take over as her captain, and instead it is not given to her, it is given to somebody else in the family. And this causes a holster and kind of sets the characters off on different paths than they were expecting. There are a couple of other perspectives that we follow outside of the Vestrit family, the main one being a pirate named Kenneth who desperately wants a live ship of his own, which he wants to use to become the king of the Pirate Isles. So talking about Ship of Destiny specifically, I think this was a very good conclusion to this series. Much like I felt about the Farseer trilogy though, this book is super long, and I felt like the point of it was about this much of it. Like, I felt like the first third to first half of the book was just a lot of people getting where they needed to be so that the ending could happen, which is exactly how I felt about Assassin's Quest. And because of that, I felt like the pacing in the beginning kind of dragged for me. However, I felt like it didn't drag quite as much as Assassin's Quest because we were getting those different perspectives. It wasn't that we were in one character's head the entire time for all of that traveling. We got to skip around to different characters that I had grown to really care about, and I wanted to see how they were doing. But it was still a lot of traveling. Then the second half of this book happened, and Robin Hobb is a genius. The way that she wraps up all of these plot threads and sets up for things that are going to happen in later series and references things that happened in previous series, and just, it's so intricately crafted. I feel like I'm watching her weave this in front of my eyes. It's amazing, it's incredible, and the series is just honestly mind-blowing. And you can read the series without reading the Farseer trilogy. If you have any interest in reading the Farseer trilogy, I would say do it first, because there are some spoilers for the Farseer trilogy in this. However, this could be read as a standalone trilogy, and I think it would still hold up. Robin Hobb really likes to put her characters through the ringer. A lot of these characters go through just a lot of shit, but in this one, I felt like there was a scene that happened that I didn't like the way it was handled, I don't think. So I'm not gonna get into spoilers here. This is still non-spoiler, but I'm gonna talk about in broad strokes, broad terms, what happened. So if you want to go in knowing absolutely none of the plot points of this book, I might skip ahead to this time here, I guess. Again, this should be non-spoilery, but I do feel like I need to articulate this to talk about why this isn't getting a full 5 stars for me. Starting in Mad Ship, and especially prevalent through Ship of Destiny, Robin Hobb adds in this other theme of sexual assault and how different characters are surviving and reacting to sexual assault, which I think in a book, especially a book from what, 1998, 99 when this was published, I felt like it was impressive that it was included, and the fact that it was a main focus and a main plot point at certain times of our main female characters. So I give it points for that. However, there was a moment in here where a sexual assault happened, and I felt like it was not necessary for the story. I'm not sure. It's really hard to articulate this, but I feel like it was done more to further another character's story arc than to prove a point, and I guess that kind of bothered me. And then the way it was handled afterwards, which is like right at the end of the book, the way it was handled and the way she kind of reacted to it bothered me just a little bit. Like, I don't think it was handled poorly, I don't think it was handled badly, but something about it just didn't sit right with me. So between that issue that I just talked about and the slow pacing in the beginning, I feel like I can't totally give it 5 stars, but everything else was amazing. I really loved how this wrapped up. I'm so excited to see where we go in the rest of Realm of the Elderlings, and I really do think Robin Hobb is becoming one of my favorite fantasy authors. It is just masterful, truly. But okay, that was it. That was the 7 books that I read in the month of February. Let me know down below if you read any of these or if these are ones that you want to get to. I have a lot of opinions about a lot of them, and I'd really love to chat with you guys about it. But I think that's all I've got for you guys today. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading, I have a link to my Goodreads down in the description below. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.